Welcome back to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me today to talk about our first mock draft of the offseason. It's going to be handled a little differently today, and by the way, please don't click off the video based off seeing Tyree Wilson #1 overall. We will explain that in a moment, but this one's going to be handled a little differently. So, how we're going to do these over the offseason, we're essentially going to have the mock drafts that we're doing, which mainly are just a way of talking about the ways this team can go. Everyone's going to have different opinions on who we draft, what we do, and that's fine. We welcome that. But the way we're going to do this, we're going to have a YouTube video that covers the draft that will be live. Not necessarily that it will be a live stream, but that I will be doing the draft throughout the video. And then we'll be putting up an article after to cover the content from the video, just kind of given another option. So, some people want to read articles, some people want to watch videos, kind of see where that goes, maybe what's preferred there. So this one, however, is going to be handled a little differently, because originally I didn't plan to make videos on these, but here we are trying it out, and we've already done the first mock draft. So you see it right here on our website. There's the link. If you need it, you'll probably already see it in the video. But we've already done mock draft 1.0 if you want to check it out and see the coverage on that by article, then this is the place to go for it. And you can see already who the first pick is if you know who that player is off of jersey and number. And no, it's not Caleb on Chason. But yeah, so to cover the mock draft here, we are using NFL Mock Draft Database. And quite frankly right now, there is not a mock draft database or simulator that is flawless or generally considered way better than all the others. I think this is the closest one that there is. Because PFF has some wild rankings. The Draft Network's down right now. There's another one in there. I think it's Pro Football Network. That one's alright. But what this one does is it takes the average rankings of prospects based off of where they're ranked around the internet, and then teams decide off of that who to select. Now, the downside of it is that there's not really a whole lot of settings to mess with, so you can't change like you can on PFF. Like, teams care more about positional value, or they care more about need, or, I want to add randomness into this. There's no settings for that, so you're stuck with what they give you, and what they gave me is Tyree Wilson going #1 overall. However, that's not going to impact too much what the Jaguars are doing, because in this mock draft, it still generally takes players around where they should go. So you still have the same prospects relatively available, but yeah, if you're looking at like what other teams are doing, it gets a little obnoxious, and this would probably be the paramount example, and maybe Will Levis going to the Lions. But this is the mock draft. So before we go down to the Jaguars' first selection and what we did there, we're going to talk about the needs that the Jaguars have. So heading into this offseason, there's a lot of players that need to be re-signed, and the way we're going to consider this is that they found a way to re-sign most or all of those players, the big ones. Jawan Taylor is kind of questionable. We don't know whether he'll be able to come back, but that's how we're going to look at this. We're going to assume there was no notable additions in free agency. You've got Calvin Ridley, obviously, coming into the team, and that's kind of where we're going to leave this. So, as far as needs for the Jaguars heading into this next season, rank them however you want. I think at the top of that list, pass rush has to be there, in my opinion. And ideally, you want that from the interior, because you already have Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker on the edge. And if you want to add another edge player, there's a question of how much time that guy will get to start on the team. You have to move Walker inside more often. There's a lot of questions that come with that. And so, ideally, you want someone in the interior. However, as you'll see on here, your top 2 interior guys, not saying there's no one else who's really good, but people I'm comfortable with taking in the first round, they're gone in the top 5 here. Jalen Carter, Brian Bresee. So, it's not really a good situation if you're wanting to address the pass rush that way. So, that's an issue with how the draft is this season. Other needs, there's a few of them. We need a nickel corner. And Trey Herndon performed actually pretty well at the end of the season. We'll actually take a look at how he did just to kind of back that up. Not that he was amazing, but someone you could rely on. And I think this team will want to bring him back this next season to start or to back up, you know. And this is, I guess, maybe not to start if you're able to address it. But you look at these grades, and we'll see, I believe over here, when they moved him to the slot. So you see a lot of these are out at corner, and we're using PFF for this, the premium stats. This week, 14, he moves to the slot. So you see the first grades, not great. Goes down against Dallas. He had a really bad game. But then you look at it after. And actually, click there. So, week 16 and on, he played pretty good at slot. And quite frankly, I think you like the way he played. But I'm not super comfortable with him being the starter. And I think the best thing this team can do is find someone else, ideally who has versatility at slot and on the outside, just so you have another option. And ideally you want that guy to start. But Trey Herndon, you know, as much as we ragged on him when he took over for Ramsey, and this last year when he struggled out wide when this team refused to move Williams outside, I think he's deserving of a spot. So, talking about other needs on this team, they don't have a second tight end other than Luke Farrell. You know, and we're going to assume Evan Ingram's back. I think, oh gosh, there's probably got to be a 99.9% chance he's going to be here next year. I mean, I can't imagine, after everything he said, how his season went, the coach he has here, the quarterback he has here, any scenario where they cannot work out some sort of deal. And they will bring him back for what they paid him before. They would be willing to do that. And I don't think he would decline it. Now, maybe it's more than that, but quite frankly, if I had to pay him, say $12 million a year, I'd make it happen. I think he's one of those players that you've got to keep because you found someone really good at a position that just doesn't have a ton of superstars. You've got Mark Andrews, George Kittle, and obviously at the top, Travis Kelce. There's some other good guys in there, but there's not a lot of superstars, and I think the way Evan Ingram played at the end of the year, I think he can be a top 5 tight end, and I think he's already really close to it, whether people want to acknowledge that or not. As far as other needs, guard could be a concern, and ideally just a versatile offensive lineman. We look at the last game that the Jaguars played this last year against the Kansas City Chiefs. And one of the biggest issues they had on offense was Chris Jones going up the middle. They just didn't have the people who could guard against it. And some things are going to be changed because you're going to have Ben Barch returning from injury, and he played actually pretty well at the start of the year. We'll actually look at how PFF considers that. Oh, hold up. So go to offense. So not a great grade week 1. After that, you got really good pass blocking grades. And so I think, you could feel comfortable with Ben Barch starting. But we saw when he went down, which was really early in the year, that the Jaguars even though they have depth there, they didn't have good enough players to be able to defend against the best. And if you want to win the AFC, which is obviously the next step for this team, you have to be better than the Kansas City Chiefs. You have to find a way to minimize those players. So that's going to be an issue that they have to tackle. And maybe Ben Barch is healthy the whole year and he's good enough to get it done. Who knows? But if I'm the Jaguars, I would like to get someone there. You've only got so many draft picks, but you want to try to get it done. As far as the last two needs that I'll address, as great as the boundary play was at corner late in the season, once they made the final moves, I mean, Tyson Campbell, I would argue he's a top 5 corner in the league right now. He's among the very best. And you look at the way Darius Williams played, another lockdown corner. I mean, they have a really good pairing on the outside. And as great as that is, there's really no answer if one of those players goes down. I mean, who do you have starting? It's Trey Herndon moving back outside, which, I mean, we all saw it with our own eyes how painful that was to watch. Or you're asking Monteric Brown to do it again. And I remember how he played against Kansas City. It wasn't good. So that is an issue. Because you are going to have injuries in the year. And you don't want to have a spot where if you get injured, you're dead. You know, other than the quarterback position. Because, yeah, if you lose Lawrence, you're screwed. Thankfully, he has rubber bones. But I think this team would benefit specifically from getting a versatile corner. And maybe that concern is answered, you know, along with nickel corner. You know, there's players in this draft who can play both that might be a little undersized, might want to go in the slot first. But that's something you want to address. And then finally, the last need I'll mention is a complimentary running back. JaMychal Hasty played pretty well, but the receiving game from the backfield can be improved a lot. They need to ideally find someone who can play similar to Travis Etienne, who could fill in if Etienne's out. And honestly, I wasn't too impressed with how much we got the running game going. I think Etienne, he's a great running back, but I don't think this team really set him up to be super successful. He had over 1,000 yards, but the run blocking wasn't great. I mean, I'm pretty sure I could verify this, maybe. I'm not sure if I can find it necessarily. Let's see. We are run blocking. Here we go. 30th in the league in run blocking. It's not good. You know, you could do a lot better than that. And the good side of it is that the pass blocking was very good this year. I think up through over half the season, they were best in the NFL in sacks allowed. That did change as the year went on. But you got to improve your run blocking, and here you can see it's 10th in the league, which is pretty good. But I think more can be done. And, you know, Ben Barch, maybe he improves that. And your second tight end, that would be a huge deal if you get someone who's good at blocking. But I digress. These are the needs that I consider. And maybe you can throw in some others. I mean, you could say this team needs an extra receiver. Who do we have to back up? Jamal Agnew, and that's it. And there's a chance he doesn't even come back because if they can't renegotiate, he saves you quite a bit of money. I wouldn't make that move, but it's on the table. So let's go ahead and jump in. So we see a lot of bizarre picks to start, but generally the same players off the board. And so who I selected with the first pick, I went with B.J. Ojulari. And the reason why I did this is because Ojulari is, I believe, at least a top 3 pass rusher in this class. Maybe second. I think I'm missing a name, though, if I'm putting him second. because there's other really good pass rushers who are going to go top 10. But I highly recommend watch film on him. Watch the way he pass rushes, the moves he has. I mean, he does some brilliant stuff. He keeps tackles on their feet and wondering what's coming next. I saw in one game where he pulls a spin move to get a sack, and later on that same game, I think it was the next drive, he does a fake spin move to trick the tackle. Like, he's very creative in the way he plays. He has a huge arsenal of moves at his disposal, and as a pass rusher, he's really good. And the only thing that really freaks you out, maybe two things. One is that he's an edge from LSU, and we can all remember how that went the last time we selected one, which was Caleb on Chason. And so that freaks out a lot of people. And secondly, B.J. Ojulari is not going to be a great run blocker in the NFL. So if you're adding him to your team, most likely the way it starts off, he's probably a guy who's going to be coming in on passing downs, mainly. And you can get him in more than that, but if you are going to bring him in on passing downs, you've also probably got to move Trayvon Walker inside on the defensive line. Now, I view that as a good thing. I think Walker was a very versatile player in college, and I think we need to use him more in that respect. And maybe they consider a role change for him this offseason. Just a thought here, but what if you move Walker more often to the inside of the line and you draft another edge player? I mean, I think that helps solve your interior pass rush a bit. Definitely helps your run blocking. Gives you an opportunity to move on from Fadikasi if you need to after this next season. And you get another really good edge rusher to pair with Josh Allen. And if Josh Allen plays the way he did at the end of this last season, then, I mean, you're going to be fine, I think. Especially if you're able to bring back your other guys like Smoot and Key. But there's other ways you can go with this pick. And a lot of people like Anton Harrison as a tackle. I didn't go with him because we have 3 tackles we could arguably be playing with this next year. So I'm not sure I want to make that move. There's other pass rushers you could also choose. Maybe you like Lucas Van Ness more or Isaiah Foskey. And you'll see as we go down, some guys fell that should not have fallen. Specifically Brian Branch. And in all reality, if this was the actual draft, I would have traded up here. But when we see players like this fall that clearly aren't going to be there, especially when you look at Branch's last game in college, what's going to be fresh on people's minds, there's no way that he's falling this far. And if he does, they need to trade whatever they can to go get him, because that would be a steal. And I think that out of all the other players in this draft of who could be available at 24, I'd probably have Branch as second on the list, if not first. I mean, he would be a good pick up here at 24. So we'll go ahead and go down to the second selection. So we got Darnell Washington in the second round. And I think there's a pretty good chance that he's going to be selected earlier than this. And if he is, that's a bummer, but I would be willing to trade capital to move up for him. I think he's that good of a player. And I would even not be angry if they selected him in the first round. Is it too high for my liking? It is. But I think Washington's going to be great at the next level. I mean, if you look at his tape, you look at the way he plays, first of all, he's a freak. He's a huge guy, and he's unlike any tight end that we've really ever seen in the NFL. When you watch him as a receiver, well, he's obviously been overshadowed by Brock Bowers this last year, because Bowers is arguably the best tight end in all of college football right now. When Washington has his chances in the passing game, he's made some awesome catches. I mean, you see the ceiling there. And the ceiling for this guy is to be among the best tight ends in the NFL. He is that good. And you pair him with Doug Peterson, one of the best tight end coaches in the NFL, if not the best. It's a match made in heaven. And I'm sure Trent Baalke would love it too, just because of how much of a freak this guy is. So this pick to me, as far as what the Jaguars would look for, it makes a lot of sense. I think it would be a steal at this point in the draft. And if they wanted to trade up into the early second round to go get him, maybe you give up one of your fourth round picks. I think that's a good move too. It just depends on where these players land as we get through the Senior Bowl, the Combine, all the interviews. We've still got almost 3 months, a little less than that. But that's what I'd go with here. You've got some other guys. If you want to go after a pass rusher in the second round, Will McDonald is a guy you could consider. He's doing really good at the Senior Bowl right now. I'd even be fine getting Andrew Voorhees. I think he'd be a really good guard to bring in. Not necessarily best in the draft. I think that's clearly Osiris Torrance right now. But Voorhees would be a really good addition to this team. As far as other players, DJ Turner, another player I really like. I don't think he's very fond of the way his college career ended, missing the tackle on Quentin Johnston that ultimately lost them the game. But you look at what this guy can do, you look at how fast he is. If you can mold him as a cornerback, you have rare traits already. This guy could be a really fantastic outside cornerback that you could use behind Darius Williams and Tyson Campbell. And I think once he figures it out in the NFL, he's going to be a really good cornerback. So that's a guy you could even consider in the second round. Another guy I like that, quite frankly, I don't think he's going to be selected by the Jaguars just because of size, is Elijah Cansey. He's got a lot of production in college. He's a really, just overall, a really great prospect. But the problem is his size. You can't do anything about it. Now, the response to that by everyone is, well, we can remember a defensive lineman from Pittsburgh that was exactly the same, that did great. But they've also said that about other players who haven't panned out like that. And the guy we're talking about is Aaron Donald. One of the best to ever do it. So there's a comparison to be made, but everyone's their own prospect. There's no copies of anyone. So Cansey might be good in the NFL. I just don't think he's a guy the Jaguars are going to consider just because of that size. If they got him, it's a great pick. I just don't think it'll happen. Go down this list. I know a lot of guys like Keon White right now. I don't know as much on him, but I think that could be a good selection as long as you still need an edge. You'll see our pick down here, but before we get to that, Xavier Hutchinson is another player. He'd be a great story coming to Jacksonville. We actually did a draft profile on him. We'll actually find that in here. Kind of get our breakdown. See if it's on this day. Here we go. And we'll have more of these in the off season. We've only done 2 so far. But Xavier Hutchinson, as a player, he could be a really good long-term investment for this team. The main issue I think for him is his route tree needs to be expanded. But as far as a depth guy that you can develop that should be a starter, Xavier Hutchinson is a fantastic choice. I mean, he's just a receiver who's got pretty much all the tools. I think that if you brought him back to Jacksonville from Iowa State, that you'd have a replacement for Zay Jones. after this next year if that's what you're looking at, or you got your fourth guy in case of injury. It's probably the smarter way to go. But that pretty quickly solves your receiver depth if you go after a guy like Hutchinson. So we'll go back to the draft. I selected Kenny McIntosh here. Maybe this is a little high for a running back. And I'm sure a lot of people will say that actually. But Kenny McIntosh is a really good fit for a Doug Peterson offense. And not only does he fit well, but he offers something entirely different to the offense. And if you want to be harder to defend, if you want to be successful on offense, you have to have a lot of ways that you can beat the defense. You can't be one-dimensional. You can't just be, a run-first offense like the Titans, or just throwing it up in the air like Jameis Winston used to do with the Bucs. We see games where those teams shut down or did shut down because there's one dimension to them. And the dimension that Kenny McIntosh adds to this team is as a receiver from the backfield. And not only that, but this guy can line up in the slot and even out wide. And we talked about Travis Etienne being able to do that, and I don't think it ever happened this last year. Heck, I think they had Trevor Lawrence outside as a receiver more than they ever did with Etienne. But McIntosh, the way he plays, he is very similar to the way Etienne is as far as the speed and that element of his game. And as a receiver, I think he led all college backs. So you add all that together, he's a pretty good addition for this team, and he's a completely unique player from what we've seen and what we see in the rest of this draft class. So that's the guy I would go with. So we'll start moving through this a little faster. Here you see we have a trade. So the Jaguars have 2 fourth-round selections. I believe they're 121 and 127. And so the way I dealt with this, we've addressed 3 needs already. We've addressed the pass rush, we've addressed tight end, and we've addressed having a complementary back on the team. So the biggest need still, you need a nickel corner, you'd like to get a guard, and you'd like to get a depth corner. Well, like we talked about earlier, we can knock out 2 of those needs right here. Because Hodges Tomlinson immediately comes in as a nickel corner for this team. I have no doubt that he can do that. He fits the mentality for the Jaguars. He's a big hitter. He's a big play guy, much like you see from Andre Sisco. And I like that. I like that kind of player. You see what Andre Sisco did, especially like back in week 10. He did give the Jaguars some life in that game where they just looked lifeless. Did they win? No, they didn't. And there was some controversy to the hits because a lot of people were upset that Sisco did it twice in that game. But hey, that's a good kind of guy to get on your team when he's going to make those big plays. And that's what you're getting with Travius Hodges Tomlinson. And not only that, but if you have a guy go down on the outside, Hodges Tomlinson can play on the boundary. He can do it. He doesn't have the ideal size, but he's done well out there in college. And if you move him outside, just move Trey Herndon back to the slot. It's not ideal, it's not perfect, but it's a move you can make. So that's where I would go at this point. And he fell down the board. I don't think necessarily that he's going to be sitting here on day 3 at the beginning of the round, especially when you consider there's going to be some compensatory picks thrown in, and that'll kind of change things around. We'll have later selections. Players won't be available, especially later in the draft. But he was sitting here, so we got to take him. And really at this point, the only thing you wish you could have been able to address is guard. And if you're able to bring back Jawan Taylor to this team and you keep Cam Robinson, I think with the 3 guys you have at tackle, one of them already has to move to guard. You have to have them all starting. So maybe that's how this team addresses it. So So for that trade, we gave up 2 selections later in the draft. We can actually see it at the end, but if I scroll up, it'll show all the picks. So 127, I took Joe Tippmann. So Tippmann has mainly played center, and that may not seem like a big need for the Jaguars, and it quite frankly isn't. But Tippmann might be a guy that you can try to play at guard. He doesn't have really any snaps at guard in college. I think it's like 13 or something. But as far as size and his ability, he does project to that position fine. And so that's a move this team can make. And you have another guy that you could start at center. Say that Luke Fortner goes down. Say that Tyler Shatley's already busy starting at left guard, or maybe he beats out Tyler Shatley. He shouldn't be available this late in the draft. At this point, you're just looking for guys who are falling. So that's where I went with this pick. Now we've got 2 other selections. It's a little while till the next selection. You can see we traded some picks here. So this was the first one. After trading 121, we traded 185 and then 202. So with this pick, kind of went back the same well, picking up another interior offensive lineman. Antonio Mafi has done pretty well at the Senior Bowl. And so, at this point in the draft, I think, like if... I don't know how to say his name, honestly, but if this guy, fast wide receiver from Princeton, was able to fall, then he'd make a lot of sense. But honestly, he might fly up the board, especially when you look at how early receivers have been drafted actually just the last year. I mean, you had guys who were projected in the 3rd or 4th round, just flying right off the board in the 2nd. I mean, for example, Alec Pierce was a guy that I would have liked in the 3rd or 4th round. He went to the Colts in the 2nd. I think the best pick we had at receiver when we got to the 3rd round was Jalen Tolbert. And he didn't exactly do a whole lot in Dallas. So guys like this, probably going to be off the board a lot earlier. And the good thing about that is that while it makes it harder to draft a receiver, you've got a lot of other really good players falling down. So Antonio Mafi, if I remember his profile right, he's got really good size. He's someone who could be really good in the interior. And at this point, you just want to throw darts at the board. You want to try to get good interior guys. So that's where I went with this one. And then we finished off the draft getting Max Melton. Now this pick, I might change it, because shortly after picking him, I did research on him and saw some off-the-field issues relating to paintball, actually, like shooting people in public or something with paintball guns. Don't quote me on that. Go look it up yourself, because I might have got that story wrong. But there was a big problem for him off the field, and so I don't think you want to try to look at that. But if it's not a huge issue, Max Melton is a guy that probably shouldn't be falling this far and could be a good selection. Maybe you go after a quarterback at this point. That might be better. But at this point in the draft, you're still trying to get best guy available. You're going off traits a little more. And if you can fix the technique, the intellectual side of playing this game, then you've got some good picks late in the draft. So you see here, that's the rest of the draft. We'll just scroll up. So here's the trade recap, and then here's our entire draft. So as far as where the Jaguars sit after this draft, your offense, you've really addressed about everything that you needed to. The only things you wish you were able to do, which you could also fix in free agency, or say bringing back a guy like Marvin Jones. You probably want another receiver. You want a depth guy there, because if one guy goes down, you're forced to start Jamal Agnew full time. unless you're getting someone in free agency. So, like, Paris Campbell might be a guy that we'd want to bring in. We want to get maybe a speed threat. He could be someone who's cheap. I mean, heck, maybe even McCole Hardman. He could be cheap. He's been out a lot of this year, and that could drive his price down. Maybe the Chiefs don't retain him. You'd also like to get some more interior depth earlier on, but at this point, you know, I'd still make a lot of these same picks. But as far as what you added, you have a great run blocking tight end. You have the ability to run 2 tight end sets now. I think Washington's a good enough catcher of the ball to get that done. I think he'll only get better there. You have a running back that you can start behind Travis Etienne. You're not as concerned if Etienne goes down in a game because you have people to fill in, especially if you keep JaMychal Hasty. And you have that receiving element to him. And you really can just use him as an offensive weapon. I mean, he looked great in college as a receiver and as a running back. So, you know, maybe another guy to go watch the tape on, but he is pretty good. As far as the defensive side of the ball, you get another pass rusher. You spend another big pick on it. And the Jaguars, they've done that a ton in recent history, and maybe you don't want to do that again. But maybe you have to. I mean, if you can't fix the problem, you got to find some way to fix it down the road. And this might be the only way. You know, unless you go get the money to sign a Javon Hargrave in free agency, assuming he goes there, or even Deron Payne. Probably have to trade for him. You got to pay him a ton of money. But B.J. Ojulari, right off the bat, he's, I think on this team, automatically a top 2 pass rusher. Depending on how he stacks up against Josh Allen, he could be the best. But I think that's a lot of projection to say he's the best pass rusher. So we'll leave it at 2. And other additions, you get another guy in your cornerback room, someone who can play really well in the slot, a really good fit there, and can also play out wide, so you get that versatility. And then finally, you had Max Melton late in the draft. That's just another depth piece. It's kind of similar to the picks with Monteric Brown and Gregory Jr. You're just trying to get a guy that maybe you can hit on late in the draft. So that's my breakdown of this. That's where we went with these first selections. Feel free to let me know what you think about them. And then, like I said, you know, a lot of people are going to have different opinions on this. We're all going to have chose different players throughout the draft, but you know, I think this is one way the Jaguars could go. It's kind of hard for me to imagine selecting an edge rusher in the first round. I don't know if they would do that right after getting Trayvon Walker, but a lot of these other picks, I think they make sense for the Jaguars. Guys that they could go after. So make sure to leave your thoughts on this and let me know what you think. And we'll have these kind of sporadically throughout the off season, probably one every couple weeks or so. And if you've got any ideas or any input on them or anything you want to see on the channel, let me know. And you guys have a great rest of your day.